It's John. Welcome to another Sunday music studio rant, whatever you want to call it. I normally do these in the mornings. I normally get up on a Sunday, spend a few hours in the studio playing around, and then talk to video for 5 or 10 minutes once I've done whatever it was I wanted to do or whatever was in my head. But today, it was such a gorgeous day. It's probably the first gorgeous Sunday we've had for a long, long time in the particular part of the UK I live. But I actually got on my mountain bike and went out for a ride. So it was quite a nice day from that perspective. So I'm sitting here, it's evening, it's dark, lights are on. So what do I want to talk about? Well, first thing is last night a group of us decided we thought we'd go out see some live bands play, and number one, the local area, the bands in the local area were pretty thin on the ground last night anyway. Not quite sure why that was, but there just didn't seem to be very much sort of advertising itself as being on in the local area, which is a shame because obviously we want to go and see some bands, and we went and saw a couple of bands playing in some local pubs, and they were rubbish, so we won't dwell on that very much. So not a great music scene last night, unfortunately, in the area in the UK I live, which is a shame because I feel that I don't gig, so I make music for me and other people, but I just sort of feel that there doesn't seem to be any promotion going on, of local music talent. The last night when I was looking for at the sort of regular venues, you have to look at each of the venues. There's no one sort of like collating all this stuff together and saying, on Saturday night the following bands are playing at the following places, then you can go and have a make a choice about whether you want to go and see them or not. I just find that really sort of quite sad. But hey, that's where we are. But I'm sure there's some sort of promotion activity in there and some money to be made by some winning entrepreneur. So what else has gone on this week? Well, I got myself a DX7 t-shirt. Yeah, I know, sad, but I just thought I'd get one of these. I saw it and it was only a few pounds, so I bought it. Bit of a rip-off, but we know that you're never going to buy a Yamaha t-shirt with DX7 written on it. But there's another good thing that comes off that, because when I actually look for official merchandise from Roland, Korg and Yamaha, do you know what, this sort of stuff, official t-shirts and what have you, they don't actually have. So, and then they get upset when people go and copy their stuff because they're copying the logo, but they're not actually selling the material themselves. Go figure that one. But there's a niche in the market for it, so hey ho. But the one thing I am pretty stoked about is that yesterday I picked up one of these, which is a Midiverb 4, Alsys Midiverb 4. I'm never sure whether it's Alsys or Alsys, but Alsys. But it's second hand, but it's absolutely mint condition. It's still in its original box, as you can see, with all the foam, all the packaging in there, and the book's still in its plastic case. It's obviously been installed somewhere because it's got the sort of telltale rack ears, but other than that, a few minor scratches on it, but the screen is still covered in its protective foam. So I bought one of those. I'll be installing that into the rack probably this evening, and then connecting it up. So on the back it's a standard sort of foot switch, MIDI in, through, out, on off switch. Is that on off? No, it's not on off switch. Power switch, power area, and then stereo in, stereo out. I might have got that the wrong way around. Stereo in, stereo out. On the back of it. So. But I actually bought this for a reason, and the reason I bought this was that, again, I've got some legacy kit around me. I mean, you can see it sitting behind me. I've got a DX7, a D50 on this side, and an M1 on this side. And The newer kit, so the bottom tier of both my racks, you can see I've got brand new synthesizers on it. Well, Jupiter on this side and the Kronos on this side. And these come packed full of effects that you can put into the final mix as part of the keyboard equation, if you like. Whereas the older DX7 and D50 and what have you, they don't have those effect units built into them. So if you want to put effects in, you can either do one of a number of things. You could probably run it into something like Ableton, and then put some effect units on the feed in Ableton, send a return, or just actually on the feed coming out of Ableton. So you can soft synth effect it. So that's generally one way, and I have done that in the past with Ableton and Pro Tools. But quite often you just want to sit and play, and when you want to sit and play, you can't sit and play by trying to run the effects through something else. So you really do need what I call a live rack unit sitting somewhere, so that you can just plumb the sound through that. What I'm not sure about at the moment is how I'm going to put this into the mixer, whether I'm actually going to run it as an in and out and a return, or whether I'm just going to straight run it as a off the stereo outs coming off the keyboards. I'd probably try both ways and then sort of work out which way around I like it. So that's tonight's little task. But so the other thing is, and I'm just going to pause the camera for a sec so I can reposition it, and I'll show you why in a sec. So we've relocated to the floor of my studio, so I can show you this rack. Okay, so the rack above is pretty much my amplification, and this rack here is what I call my sound reinforcement. So those of you who've watched my videos in the past will know that I am quite an advocate of some of the legacy pieces of equipment. I think there were some great pieces of equipment produced over the years, and you know, it's up to us to sort of keep these pieces of equipment serviced and in use, because they have their place in music production. And you know, I go to friends of mine who've got proper professional recording studios, and in their racks you'll have all the modern state-of-the-art piece of equipment, and then you'll have some legacy pieces in there because they just can't get something to sound that way without it there. I'm not that anal, but I do believe that there is a place in modern music setups, especially home studios, for this type of kit. And I wish I had a bigger studio, because I've got lots more of this stuff sitting in storage, which I just can't have out because I just physically don't have the space at the moment. I'm looking to rectify that, but at the moment I just don't physically have the space. So I bought a number of these. I've had them for in excess of 10 years. Yeah, probably about that. And I bought them because predominantly at that point in time I was looking for a way of enhancing and expanding the sounds available to me, but with limited space. So where my studio previously was, I had much less space than I have now. So I mean, I couldn't have had 2 racks of keyboards up in my old studio, but that's, you know, I've moved on. I've got a bigger space now. So I bought them for that, and the reason I tended to buy them is because they are what we commonly refer to now as Ropplers. So they take a sampled sound in a format that can then just be literally loaded into the keyboard very, very quickly. And the U220 is effectively the rack version of the U20, and the D110 is the rack version of the D110, the D10 synthesizer, and the U110 is the Roppler for playing multiple cards from that series. And then what Roland did in that sort of whole era is they then issued a number of sound library cards, which were known as the SN series. And the SN series went all the way up to, you could use the SN series in the D70, but you couldn't use it in the D50. You could use it in the D10, the D20, the D70, but it didn't work in the D50 because the D50 worked on a different synthesis technique. But they then introduced a number of cards, and if I show you that one to camera, that's Latin and percussion, orchestral winds, original strings, sorry, not oriental. And they made, I think, if memory serves me correctly, there were about 15 of these Roland cards, plus there were a further 3 specific cards for the D-series synthesizer, and then a number of other companies also made cards for the platform as well. So there was a wealth of sounds out there. So what I did was I went and I bought the units, and then over a number of years, I mean it was a number of years, as these cards came up on eBay, I bid for them and bought them. So I now have a complete set, and they're really useful because if you're I don't know, if you're looking for sort of like just some sort of strings or wind or something just to sit in the background quite often on a track, you know, rather than use space on the polyphonic of one of your master keyboards, it's actually quite easy to just MIDI up and use the space off one of these units themselves. So you're not actually using any bandwidth of your polyphonic on there, but you are using it on these, and these are 16 note polyphonics. They're quite good for just sort of sitting in the background of a mix. So the last unit in this bottom space here was a TX81Z, and I bought the TX81Z when I got rid of my first DX7 many moons ago, and I to be honest, I had a DX7-1. At that point in my life, I could never get the hang of the sort of the whole FM synthesis and the programming on the DX7. So it sort of sat in the corner for a bit, and then I decided it was probably better to pass it on to somebody who was going to use it. So I did, and I bought the TX81Z a few years after that, thinking, well, actually sort of regretting getting rid of the original DX7. And again, it's sort of very similar. I'll talk about the TX81Z in detail in another video. But the sort of synthesis, the basic synthesis patterns are similar, but it has I think it's only got 4 operators in it rather than the 6 that sit up on the normal DX7-2 that I now have. So what I'm trying to say really is, you know, don't shut your mind off to good old pieces of kit that float around on eBay. If you can pick some of these up, and you know, you can pick these up for 30, 40, 50 pounds sterling, you know, and you can put them in a rack and they just work. You know, there's no issue with them, they just really just work. And they produce sound, and you can get sort of pretty funky with them. You can assign channels, you can assign outputs on them. I'm not having been around the back of one of these for a while, but you know, some of them have 4 or 6 outputs that are user assignable, so you can actually have different sounds coming off them, going off in different directions. So you know, they're pretty versatile. And if I can remember how to, I'll actually run up the demos on them just to give you an idea of what they sound like. But there you go. You know, legacy kit is good. If you can buy it cheaply on eBay or Gumtree or wherever your preferred source is, you know, you should buy it, give it a go. If you don't get on with it, pass it on to somebody else so you can make use of it. But otherwise, you know, don't let this stuff sit in the cupboard.